Welcome to the Critical Media Studies Podcast. We're your hosts, Mike Rapici
and Barry Falk.
Hello, Michael. How are you doing tonight?
Hey, Barry, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good to see you. And I know you have an exciting thing to announce to our listeners and viewers and whatever
I do. And I just, I want to say the website is back online. It's up, it's functional. And we'd love to hear from you guys. So if you're interested, it's at www.criticalmediastudiespodcast.com. From the website, you can listen to the podcast. You can also search for any and all episodes, and again, listen to them directly from the website. So that's easy. You can see what we look like. There's pictures of us on there. There's also, I think, most importantly, what I'm most excited about is there's a contact form there. So we'd love to hear from you guys if you have questions, requests, thoughts. Yeah, it's all there. So
yeah, we would dearly love to hear suggestions about, where we've been and where you think we should be headed.
Absolutely. And any commentary on, on where we are is fun as well. But speaking of where we are, this is an exciting evening. We are about to talk about something that I'm quite frankly shocked has taken us this long to get to. So Barry, I'm going to turn it to you.
And I'll say just a couple words about Marshal McLuhan and Quentin Fiore's collaborative text, The Medium is a Massage, published in 1967. And I'll say just a little bit, before I throw it back to Dr. Rapici, I'll just say a little bit about where this fits in the canon, in the McLuhan body of work. So the first thing to say is that title is a pun. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. The title of the book is The Medium is the Massage. So the medium is the massage, but the visual pun, at least, might be that the medium is the mass age. But originally, a couple of years earlier, I think 1964, Marshal McLuhan opened his first major work of media studies, and one of the premier texts of media studies, called Understanding Media, the Extensions of Man, the Extensions of the Human. And indeed, this, as a subtitle suggests, and this is an idea also presented and elaborated and visually portrayed in the later book, a crucial argument in McLuhan is that media is a prosthesis. Media is something that acts, that aims to be, and in fact extends, is meant to be an extension of the human sensorium, of the human body. And that's working on almost every possible level, that idea of extension, media as an extension, or at some points, an acceleration of either human personality or human personality traits, or a quite literal extension of the sensorium of the body. Okay, I'm stumbling all over myself in talking about the title, but let me go back to a couple of years earlier to Understanding Media. So we have the same words without the pun. They serve to title. It's the name of Chapter 1, Part 1, in the introduction to Introducing Media, Understanding Media, rather. The title of that section is The Medium is the Message. And in the difference, in that slight but also very significant difference between the medium is the message and the medium is the massage, this later collaborative production full of photo images and photographs. And so it's not just a text, it's also an interesting avant-garde sort of collage of words and images. In the difference between just the title phrase, you get a sense of the vast difference between understanding media in 1964 and the medium is the Massaage or Massage in 1967. So what's happened in between? Well, the big story in terms of McLuhan is he hasn't really changed his ideas, but his ideas in the interim between 1964 and 1967, his ideas are picked up. They are starting to circulate outside of the academy. They're starting to get television, starting to get a television in newspapers, but also in television. He makes more and more television appearances. And that basically, there are commercial reasons behind the medium as the massage, as well as intellectual reasons that, McLuhan, basically publishers say, listen, why don't you wrote an academic book on media studies. Can you tell us what you're about in a simpler, different, more vibrant form? And boy, howdy, was Marshal McLuhan ready for that opportunity. So what we have in the medium is the massage is an attempt to condense, to sell, to brand McLuhanite ideas. But also, I think, it's not simply a sellout, although spreading his message about the Massaage through the instruments of the Massaage is definitely what's on McLuhan's mind. But I would argue it's not a betrayal at all. It's, that in many ways, it is a clarification and a kind of, a wonderful condensation of his major ideas.
I think
the title, if you wanted to talk,
I think that's fair, but I think it's interesting because, he's a very careful writer, and in the interviews that I've read, he's very careful to remain agnostic. I think his goal is not to advocate for one thing or another, and so the idea that he's doing this for I still see this as an academic text. And what's funny about it is there's a way of looking at this that says, well, he's being playful with his approach. And I'm sorry, nothing about Saint Marshall says that there's a terribly acute or active sense of humor about the man. I take him as a very serious person, to be quite frank with you. And so as I see this, I think that what he's doing, and you had said this, he's looking for, or he's found another way to have an academic discussion, but to do it in less academic terms. And
that's a great way of putting it.
And the fun thing about this is, you look at the title, the idea of there's a couple things that jump out to me with the title. Massage is the obvious one, right? And the idea that a massage is, he makes the argument that the media work us over, that they sort of make us passive or more relaxed in our acceptance of media's intentions. The argument about massage being mass age, this idea that it is the definition of the age. What was interesting to me as you were talking is the use is the medium is the message. It is the mass age. It is this ubiquitous presence which defines everything. And so in looking at that, I guess what I'm saying is I look at this idea of just sort of totality and the idea that this is a commercial endeavor. It's also very much an academic endeavor, but it's also, it can walk that line without being unfaithful to either, because it's everything all at once. And I think that's his point. Like, in a way, this book is the perfect vehicle to make the argument that what does he say right after the title? All media work us over completely, right? This idea that we are just, it's everywhere, and it defines things, it shapes things, and it positions us, and it manipulates us in a way to make us passive and accepting. Like it's complete.
Accepting of what, Michael? Accepting. I'm going to try to answer that, or rather, I'm going to ask you a question about it. Accepting of what? Is it to be? Is media? Is the implication that media is working us over? in order to be more accepting of the content of the media message? What exactly is the massage getting at, or
Well,
making
so
it more pliable or more willing to accept, do you think?
remember the idea that content and message are two discrete things doesn't work here, right?
Yeah,
His
no, he wants to
argument,
contest that, right?
he,
Yeah.
his argument is that, again, to go back to the pun, the medium is the message, right? Like
Is.
the shape
Yeah.
of the media, or excuse me, yeah, the shape of the media is the message that we are. And I think this is the wonderful, like this is the first time I looked at this book, I wasn't terribly enthralled. I was like, okay, this is sort of avant-garde, pedantic sort of, you're showing off. It's really quite powerful. And I think that, what are we being accepting of? Well, we're being accepting of the advertising, but that's the point of advertising. We're being accepting of the shape and the form of media, which, as we see shortly, shapes our institutions. It defines the boundaries of our lives. In many ways, it
Without us
shapes.
wearing it, without us being fully aware of that,
Yeah.
or
So the
wanting to
argument, for
admit it,
example,
right?
that this is a product, or excuse me, a prosthetic or an extension, right? That we willingly wear the prosthetic because we don't have a choice, right? That it
Yeah.
is an extension of us. We can't function effectively without this. And what we see, and I'm going to stop after this, but what we see is that in the institutions that have failed to keep up with the advance and development of media, we have failure. And so there's the other side of this argument. You are accepting of the media. You are accepting of the message because this is the mass age in which you exist.
Right. And
And
it's
if
working
you
on you. It's massaging.
you cannot exempt yourself from it. As an individual, you can't exempt yourself from it. But the institutions that shape our world. So he talks about government, he talks about family, he talks about employment, all of these things that don't keep up with the shaping that the media enforces fail us, or they not fail us, but they fail to perform properly
Well,
because
Philip,
they're anachronisms.
that's an important characterization we're going to get over and over again. I think that you just sort of, that's a nice summary of his institutional critique, his critique of institutions. That the problem with institutions is they're antedated or archaic in specific relation to media, which is accelerating all these changes. And the institutions, there's this huge lag time. There's a lag time. Michael, I know you want to go, because we talked about this. I know you want to go back to near the beginning to page 9 in the text, but something you said, I wanted to flag and just make a quick insert, because of something you said that was really important, and you didn't elaborate, and I wanted to have Marshal McLuhan elaborate on it, because I think it will be, even though it's kind of in the middle of the portion of the book that we're going to talk about today, I think this statement, in your statement and McLuhan's statement on this, in this particular regard, is a kind of crucial beginning point for discussion of his book. So you talked about McLuhan's agnosticism regarding media. Now tell me if I'm wrong, but I take you to mean by that phrase that he is that, and you rightly said this is something that he often refers to. This is a common trope or a common rhetorical term that he comes up, that he will always produce when asked, because in interview situations, especially at the time, it was a time when people were as anxious about the effects of television, especially on young minds, right? On children, when they were as anxious about the effects on child psychology from exposure to television, prolonged exposure to television programming. When people were as anxious about that as they are now about the effects of social media on young minds and
Right.
bodies. Okay, so so when prompted anxiously by by interviewers to take a stand. And this is what I take you to mean by his agnosticism. When prompted to take a stand, when pushed to take a stand about, well, is television any good? Is technology a good thing or a bad thing? Tell us.
Mm-hmm.
He really I mean, this is McLuhan's foundational point. That's why even though it's something that comes up in the middle of the text, or at least the middle of the part of the text we're reading today, talking about today, I think actually you're right to flag it and say this got to be kind of at the head of our discussion. There's something like a programmatic / systematic refusal to take a stand on whether media is good or bad. Going back to what you said in the title, I think his basic approach is media is. It's
Well,
neither good nor bad. Oh, you
it is.
disagree?
No. I emphatically agree, but I want to add something to it,
Yes, sir.
right? What he does, and I think it was the Playboy interview that he did, where he's pressed to say, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? And his response is essentially, it's a thing.
It's
I
a
can't
thing.
say if it's
Yeah.
good or bad. And what's interesting about it, and you may disagree with this, but I don't think that. So first of all, I think he takes his argument very seriously. This is not intellectual play for him. I think he sees this as a real thing. He's not trying out a theory. If he is in a position to say, well, I think it's good or I think it's bad, what he's done in making us, or what he would be doing in making a statement like that, is exempting himself. We talked about this with with Law and with Latour and with actor network theory about decentering human subjectivity in actor network theory. If the medium is the massage, if the medium is the massage, if the medium is the message, then trying to assign a value to it is to assert a position outside of media to value it. And that's an impossibility. Right. So in a way, it's one thing to say, well, okay, so he's agnostic. And I said that and I stand by it. But at the same time, he can't be anything else. If media is in fact the massage, if this is a state of being, then you can't step outside of that, because it's not a state of being, it is the state of being. And that's what he says, right? The medium is the massage, the message, the massage.
Well, I think you've gone on to make a kind of ontological point, which is that media has a essence, or a being. Rather, media has a being, and in a sense, he refuses to exempt himself from being part of the network.
Exactly.
If to make a judgment, to stand outside media and say, well, it's bad, it's over there, that's a fallacy according to his system. That's contradicting his system. Absolutely. I'm just going to point to this on page 25, and then I know you wanted to go someplace closer to the beginning, but I think this is also it's important what happens kind of midway through the first part of the text. As I mentioned before, as we talked about before, this is a kind of this is a word picture book, right? A word image book. And on page 25, we have a dramatic, we have white font. I'll describe it to viewers. It's black background, white font on black background, very dramatic. And there's just one sentence, and the one sentence sort of proceeds, vertically down the page. And it takes up the whole page, this one sentence. And here's the sentence. And I think it's related to what you were just talking about. It's another version of McLuhan's studied programmatic refusal to deliver a final verdict on media or technology because it's impossible to stand outside the system. Likewise, he wants to say, I don't want what I'm doing to be taken as either a celebration or as doomsday talk, because both those rhetorical registers are out of place when we're talking about something as complex as technological being and networks. So here's the sentence. There is absolutely no inevitability as long to anything, right? That's open-ended. There is absolutely no inevitability as long as there is a willingness to contemplate what is happening. Now, Dr. Rapici, Michael, do you want to take a quick stab at what's going on here? What's this caution mean?
So
mm-hmm.
I have this sentence, this page, flagged and fairly heavily annotated. I have more words than the page does to say about this. So,
Please.
I have a question for you about this.
No, I didn't expect this. Now
and
I fell into your trap.
No, far from it. But I think that I want to return to this. Perhaps this is a good ending spot. This is a good landing spot as opposed to a starting point. And the reason
you wanted to go somewhere
but
else,
I'm gonna tease my response to it. Okay. I don't see this the way you see it, I don't think.
Oh, really?
I don't think.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So inevitability to me is still a neutral term, right? So it just means that something is preordained or it is ordained. This is a thing that will happen if something is inevitable. But he's not saying good or bad. It simply means things will follow a course. And so to me, I look at this as him saying, I'm going to refer, there is no room for randomness if we fail to contemplate, if we flip this sentence around, right? So he says there's no inevitability as long as there's a willingness to contemplate. The question I have for this is what happens when we do fail to contemplate? Does that create an inevitability? And if so, what might that inevitability be?
Oh, well, that's interesting.
And I think that there are some tea leaves sprinkled throughout here. Again, I'm not saying he's picking a side, but I think that there's an interesting set of questions that I think that he raises here that lead us to this question. So let's come back to that.
So that's all you want to say about this for the moment. So
you have a thought on it? What's that?
Well, I mean, I have to say I'm a little puzzled. Can I do that? Can I tease?
Oh, sure. Sure.
I'm a little puzzled by your reading of inevitability. And you were saying it's neutral. It sounds like I mean, I'm seeing a positive value there, that he seems to be cautioning us. I don't know. I don't. Here's my reading of it, and I guess my puzzlement is
good. If you give me your reading now, that gives me ample time to back out and find a way to disavow what I just said.
I don't want you to do that. What I'm puzzling about is not so much your reading of it, but I'm puzzling whether or not you feel that whether your reading is sounds like you have a positive. I'm totally rambling here. Why don't I tell you what I think it means, and then you'll tell me later on whether or not you think I'm off base. So what I think is going on just in that first part of this sentence, I can't believe we are such English majors. What are we doing here? We're quibbling over. This is
obnoxious.
Why the governor wants to get rid of English departments, and you know we're going to have to. We're going to have to sort of behave ourselves for the rest of this podcast in order to keep on track. But at any rate, what I thought is going on here in those first couple words is that he's warning us against an attempt against what he feels is our knee-jerk tendency to accept technological change. Okay.
I agree.
All right. Okay. And I was puzzled because I thought you were thinking there was something else going on there, but we're agreed that he is making a warning of some sort.
Right. But I'm going to say,
all right.
I think that he's fully capable of issuing a warning, not as a, hey, bad things happen,
as a
state of cause and effect. And I think
Color
he's
me
willing to
intrigued.
say, what's that?
Color me intrigued.
Okay.
We'll return to this, and I'm color me intrigued. I see what you're doing.
Okay.
Okay.
So
We
let's,
put a pin in it, as they say. We're going to put a pin in that and go back.
yes, and may God strike us if we lose track of the pen. So um, this is a difficult discussion to have. This is a poor medium for discussing a picture book. So
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
um,
We're having to describe but we're having to describe in words pictures. And what would McLuhan think? He would be hating on this, I think, right now.
Yeah, I don't think this is what he intended, but that's too bad.
That's too bad.
So I have a question about what he's done on, dear listener, if you'll turn to page 9, you'll know where I'm going. But I think before then, just to give the outline, the layout of the book, excuse me.
Sure.
The first page just says "Good morning" with an exclamation point, and it has a picture of an egg on a plate with some sort of branding on the egg. The second picture that we have is the Massaage, and it's got a man with his hand. It's a picture of a hand behind the ear, like we're listening to something, but it's very dark and obscured. There are a series of pictures that correspond or extend arguments that he's making in small textual blurbs that sit by the pictures. So if we look at the first one, for example, "Good morning" with the egg and the branding, right? My interpretation, this is, hey, egg for breakfast. This is great, but it is a branded embryo. We come into this, there is no escaping it. You're about to consume this. Hi, happy you. This is every day.
It's not an egg. It's a mediated image of an egg.
Fair. Okay.
Right.
Thank you. Right. So I'm not going to try and go through every image, right? But I want to just say that is sort of the form of this. So the first page that actually has text, his argument laid out, has a puzzling one for me. And so I want to read a couple of sections of this that I think make my question about this for you. And this is a genuine question. I'm not trying to set a particular argument.
This is another trap. This is another Rapici trap.
They all are. Okay. So he says, and I'm going to jump about paragraph to paragraph here. The medium or process of our time, electronic technology, is reshaping and restructuring patterns of social interdependence. Skips down. Societies have always been shaped more by the nature of media by which men communicate than by the content of the communication. So here he's sort of picking up the media is the medium is the message, right? The idea that these are shaped. He says, it is impossible to understand social and cultural changes without a knowledge of the workings of media. In other words, if we don't understand how we are being massaged, how we are being worked over,
indeed,
it's impossible to understand or recognize how it's changing us or what it's doing to us.
Right.
Little more. Innumerable confusions and a profound feeling of despair inevitably emerge in periods of great technological and cultural transitions. Our, quote, age of anxiety, unquote, is in part the result of trying to do today's job with yesterday's tools, with yesterday's concepts. Okay, so.
And on the top of that page, you want to draw attention to.
Yeah, so what we have on the top of the page is a woman's left hand. She has very pretty manicured nails. Seems like there's a wedding ring on the hand.
Yes.
It's angled slightly to the left as if she's showing off her hand or the ring.
Indeed.
And underneath it, the caption says,
nothing about rings, nothing about
30
hands,
million toy trucks were bought in the US in 1966.
Right.
What is this? Because I understand the egg, I understand the ear, I understand and the images correspond fairly clearly to various arguments that he's making or extend arguments that he's making. What's your take on this?
What? Okay.
Because I have an idea, but I don't know that it's right. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Do you
no,
want?
I'm done. That's it. I have an idea, but no, I don't want to go first. I absolutely.
Well, I think you picked and we were talking about this before we started doing whatever it is we're doing. Recording, I guess is the word. Digital recording. Um, I think this is one of the puzzle. I mean, there are many puzzling images in the book, and I think we have to say to listeners and prospective readers of this book that there is. I mean, you mentioned the word avant-garde. There isn't. McLuhan was very influenced by the visual modernist avant-garde. There's a wonderful new book called Distant Early Warning by Alex Kitnick
Mm-hmm.
that is all about and tries to make a relation, tries to relate directly, relate or connect McLuhan directly to the visual artists of the 1960s and saying that there was a similar kind of, for example, play with advertising going on in pop art images, but not just in pop art artists of the day of the 1960s. Not just that, but so he is thinking. So one of the things about paintings and images, especially pop art images, is that the meaning is not a singular thing. So I think that's something fair to say about all the images in the book, that he wants you to puzzle out the connection, and it's not always clear, immediately clear, what the connection between the words and images are. And in fact, I don't know. I think in this image, with this puzzling image, in particular, I think that, I'm going to give you one idea of what I think it means, but you're probably going to have a different one. And I don't know if there's an obvious, easy way for us to police the difference and for me to tell you you're wrong and for you to tell me I'm wrong. But here's my reading of it. That the caption 30 million toy trucks were bought in the US in 1966. So this is a collage. This is a modern. So first off, I'll say what you have here is a collage. And by collage, I mean that it's not enough to see the words and then look at the picture. And the words are not meant to explain the picture. The words are meant to add some friction to the image and mess up your perception, twist your perception of the image. Right. So the caption is very straightforward. It's about commerce. Mm-hmm. It's a data information about commerce. Mm-hmm. We mass produce in America and consume toy trucks like nobody's business. And then this is juxtaposed with a seemingly, and this is the emphasis I would put, a seemingly organic, natural image of a woman's beautiful manicured hands with an elegant piece of jewelry. And I think McLuhan's point is that the hand has been turned into an advertisement and into a brand, and into a slogan, into something as inorganic, as something as thoroughly commodified as the 30 million toy trucks that were bought and sold in the US. Okay. So I see this as a kind of reminder that what we think is nature is actually, I'm not going to say cyborg, that's too much anticipating a later argument. But what looks now, in a way, that image, Michael, is like the image, I read it as being similar to the image that you mentioned, opens up the book. It's an egg. It's breakfast. But wait, this egg has a label on it. There's something about this egg that says it's part of the mediated world. Likewise, there's a hand here, but it's not just a hand. It could be an advertisement for a wedding ring. It could be an advertisement for a particular kind of nail polish. And then you have the consumer in the consumer data at the bottom. And I think he's trying to. I think the point of that is they want to tell you the natural world that you think is natural is not so natural.
Okay, so I have a question for you about this. I see the consumer aspect here. It reeks of it, right? And on one hand, we've got the caption which says 30 million toy trucks, right? We make a hell of a lot of toy trucks. This is consumption. On the flip side, what could be further away from toy trucks than beautiful nails and a wedding ring? And it doesn't matter which we're arguing for here. The fact is that in one image, we have a we run the entire gamut of things we could possibly want, right? Beautiful hand, wedding.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Is there a possible Marxist argument in here?
Well, remember that Marx really loved Adam Smith. I mean, so like there's um
Because if you tie this idea of consumption and you look at this in terms of the toy truck, this is common. This is.
Can you let me finish my
Oh,
sentence?
by all means.
I'm eager to hear your explanation, but if I just say, I can imagine any Marxist listeners to this podcast who just want to kill me right now because I open a sentence by saying that Marx approves of Adam Smith. And if I don't want to let that,
I don't want
to let that hang.
No, especially now that we can be reached via email. That's a very bad thing. So go ahead.
Yeah. So let me just finish the thought here, which is, so I was working toward an answer to your direct question, and so I'll just I don't want to take up too much airtime, but I just want to finish the thought. The thought is, there's definitely a presentation of capitalism here. Is it Marxist? I don't know. At some points, there seems to be a critique, a discussion of capitalism and how it works is what Adam Smith provided. Marx was very critical, but also used Adam Smith's descriptions of the capitalist division of labor and thought that was fair game. So, there's a difference between a description of capitalism and a criticism of it. Marx is both a description, unlike Adam Smith. Marx is both a description of capitalism and a critique of it. And, I think it's a complex answer. I don't know if I can give you a yes or no answer about where McLuhan fits on this. Partly, and I mentioned this because we have been talking about agnosticism.
Mm-hmm.
Part of his agnosticism means that he is more like Adam Smith than he is Karl Marx, in the sense that he is very interested in this book and also in the book prior, Understanding Media, in describing how systems work more than in criticizing.
I think that's a good answer. And so the way I'm reading this now is there's a very large, unexplained gap between the idea of 30 million toy trucks and finely manicured nails and a diamond ring. But he says, again, it's impossible to understand the social and cultural changes without a knowledge of the working media. His argument in the coming pages is that our institutions have failed to prepare us for this, that we reading this book probably don't understand media. And
don't even think or care to.
Exactly. Right? So your response to this is likely, well, what the hell is this? And you move on. But then he says, a profound feeling of despair inevitably emerges as the periods of great technological and cultural transitions. Anxiety is in great part result trying to do today's job with yesterday's tools and yesterday's concepts. His argument is that we're stuck with yesterday's tools and concepts. And we look at this, and what we see is a very broad range of desire, none of which makes sense.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed.
All right, that's my stab at explaining the hand in the toy trucks. I got nothing else for you.
Yeah. So you're saying, well, I think you added a really interesting layer to what we're talking about. So if I understand you, you're saying that that's a really aptly placed juxtaposition of word and image, in that we're kind of confused what it means, and you're saying that he kind of realizes that, and our inability to decode
is his
point. Relation is his point.
Yeah, I think so.
I like that.
Okay. That. Well, good. We're going to say Barry and Mike 1. Marshall, I don't know what. Where else do you want to go with this? There's to me, the other thing that I thought was really fascinating here was a few pages forward. he starts this section, each in 2-page increments where we have text and an image, text and an image, text and an image. And he goes, the first one is you, then your family, then your neighborhood, then your education, then your job, then your government, then the others. And it's like he's progressing from the center out, talking about all of the constructions upon which we rely for, a sense of place, a sense of meaning, and a sense of security. Do you want to, is any of these tickle your fancy in particular?
Yeah, I think we should do a little bit of McLuhan I Ching. I'm going to pick a page and we're going to talk about it.
All right.
And I'm going to ask you what's going on. And or rather, I'll ask for your comment.
Okay.
I'll ask for your take and your comment. I guess let's be more specific. I want to be more specific in my directives, because we want to be as focused as possible. So I'm going to pick a page at random in the McLuhan I Ching, and I'm going to read a little bit of it. And then I'm going to ask for your comment / takeaway. Like, what do you take away, and what do you think the reader should take away from this?
Gotcha.
From this section. And you're right. This whole section, I guess, roughly between, what is it? Starting with the family, your
12,
family,
right.
14. Yeah. Okay. So 12
through
20, right?
Right.
Through 24. Starting with you. Yeah. On 12, going to 24. It seems to form a unit within the larger unit. And there seem to be it's kind of this interesting, speaking of, it's almost like these are short film segments or video segments that interrupt they have a totality to themselves. They're short, but they have a totality. Okay. So
and it's worth noting that this section ends with our discussion from earlier about inevitability.
Indeed,
so, here we go.
It does. So now, from what we were saying earlier, I think you wanted to tie in this whole section to McLuhan's take on institutions and their shortcomings and their shortfalls.
Well, I think he's making a series of connected arguments. I don't think that any of these are outside the others. I think that
I agree. Yeah. Right. Like as a whole, you think there's an argument about institutions here. So we'll return to that, but let's look at a discrete part of it.
Okay.
And I want you to read with me page 22, and I want to ask for your response / takeaway.
The government. We're going. Okay.
22. This is a section called Your Government. It's hard to find out, in case we stumble or fall, dear listener. You should know that one of the effects of the word picture of the hybrid form of this book is that sometimes it's hard to figure out where the F and page numbers are. So sometimes we're struggling, but I think we're on the right page. Your government, right?
Yep.
Okay. Nose counting, a cherished part of the 18th century fragmentation process, has rapidly become a cumbersome and ineffectual form of social assessment. The public, in the sense of great consensus, is fit of separate and distinct viewpoints, is finished. Today, the mass audience can be used as a creative participating force. Okay, the real germ of this is that those 3 sentences that form the second paragraph and that end the section. Okay, now I'll read it briefly and ask for your takeaway. A new form of politics, and interestingly enough, he has politics in scare quotes, is emerging, and in ways we haven't yet noticed. The living room has become a voting booth. Participation via television in freedom marches, in war, in revolution, pollution, and other events is changing everything. Comments, takeaway?
Sure. So I think that let's start. Okay, so The public in the sense of a great consensus of separate and distinct viewpoints is finished. I think he's making the argument here that we have made the shift from individuals with individual perspectives, or even clans with consistent perspectives, to a uniform presence or a uniform existence. And this, I think, is consistent with this idea, television in the house, right? That everybody gets the same message.
I think bingo, Dr. Rapici. Bingo.
Oh, I like bingo. Bingo is good. So to deny that the mass audience can be used as a creative participating force, it is instead merely given packages of passive entertainment. So we have been anesthetized. We have been. Is that too strong?
No, I don't think it's too strong. I was shaking my head a little bit because he seems in that passage to be almost condemning television, and usually he's trying to scrupulously avoid that
Well,
language.
look what he says next, though. Politics offers yesterday's answers to today's questions. This is referring back to the part that opens this section, right? The government still engaged in, right, nose counting has become cumbersome, ineffectual. The government is functioning with yesterday's tools. And what has happened is we have become sort of this mass blob of uniform perspective because of what media has done. And I don't think he's saying it's good or bad. I think you can make the argument that, hey, this is a great way to get consensus, right? We can agree on something. That's all it took.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that's an important, I'm getting back to the turn back a second for the Marx Adam Smith dichotomy. I think that's actually, I think we may have stumbled on a helpful way of thinking about the book. He is trying to, a lot of this could be criticism, maybe it veers on criticism, but he always or it could be read that way or interpreted that way. But in general, what he's trying to do is describe, because he believes we're not able to describe what really is happening.
Well, I think here's the key line here. The living room has become a voting booth. We're not fully passive. We're just uniform, right? What we watch, because we can watch channel A, we can watch channel B. And this isn't to be confused with our current conception of sitting in front of a screen where we have 5 billion different streaming options, right? But you can watch this, you can watch that, or you could probably turn it off. And we're not going to turn it off because it's in our homes. But what our choices have been simplified, but there is still a choice. And that choice is voting. Do you watch channel A or do you watch channel B? So it's not that we are rendered completely ineffective and passive. It's that our choices in many ways are defined for us, but we still have the option to choose. And we do, based on what we watch in our living room. Participation via television and Freedom Marches, War, Revolution, Pollution, and other events is changing everything. So there is still an effect. And he's not saying good or bad. He's just saying, look, the way that we are represented is different. The way that we speak out is defined by the media, and it's going to have a knock-on effect. How do you explain the presence of American Gothic sitting opposite this passage?
This seems to be that's how this written section fits into the larger overarching theme of the section that you identify. So what we have on the left side of the page, on the one side of the 2 pages column, is the argument, which is the game has changed. We haven't realized it. But television, I'm going to use, you're going to be proud of me for this, Dr. Rapici. I want to use network theory. So my quick takeaway on this passage, and I think this is true of all this section here, is it's incredibly prescient. No, he's not describing our world of 50 million options, but he is, in a way, describing our world of, he is describing our media environment nonetheless. So on this page, what he's saying is something has happened. We don't even really realize it. Media, there is no longer Michael Rapici in television, or imagining Dr. Rapici, Dr. Falk, and the television all in some room. It is no longer Barry Falk and Mike Rapici and the television. It's a network, and the network consists of television programming, all the viewers, including Drs. Rapici and Dr. Falk. In other words, this is a network event. That's one of the things. That's when you're talking about the uniformity. Yeah. The uniformity is the media. It is affected by the media. So that's okay. And you asked the question, why is there a picture on the facing page of American Gothic, of the old-timey American image? So on the left hand of the column, if you think of this, if you think of the 2 pages not as 2 pages, but as a continuum, yes, with a right-hand side, with a left-hand side with words, and a right-hand side that has the Grant Wood American Gothic reproduction as an illustration. On the left-hand side, you got modernity, or you got the moment described. And the moment that he's described is you become a network. Now, the public is a network. And that happened because of the intervention of television in the home. So that's modernity. That's the contemporary moment. And then what do you have? I mean, it's obvious from that context, and this is true of this whole mini section. What's there on the right-hand side? The right-hand side is what what he thinks most of his readers think. Where are they mentally? They're still in the American Gothic world, in this rural universe that's depicted on this page. Okay. But modernity, i.e. his contemporary moment of media technology and networked publics, that's the reality. Here's an image of the reality, our fantasy image of our reality on the right-hand side.
Okay. Let me give you one that I think will allow us to discuss our pin about inevitability.
Please.
If we jump back, so he was just talking about government. If we jump back to the section he says on education. Yes. And so this is, if you're following along at home, this is pages 18 and 19. On the left-hand side is a paragraph under a heading of your education. And on the right-hand side is a picture of a circuit board. And he says, there is a world of difference between the modern home environment of integrated electric information and the classroom. Today's child is attuned to up-to-the-minute adult news, inflation, rioting, war, taxes, crime, bathing beauties, and is bewildered when he enters the 19th century environment that still characterizes the educational establishment, where information is scarce but ordered and structured by fragmented, classified patterns, subjects, and schedules. It is naturally an environment much like the factory, set up with its inventories and assembly lines. The child was an invention of the 17th century. He did not exist in, say, Shakespeare's day. He had, up until that time, been merged with the adult world, and there was nothing that could be called childhood in our sense. Today's child is growing up absurd because he lives in 2 worlds, and neither of them inclines him to grow up. Growing up, that is our new work, and it is total. Mere instruction will not suffice.
Damning critique of the lag time between our educational systems, in his perception, and the modern world as emblematized. I guess we have the reverse of what I was describing in the grant, in that later section. In that section, the right-hand side of the page of the canvas was dedicated to an image that represented a fantasy of the old days that's being superposed on reality, modern realities. And the modern reality of television and network personalities, network publics rather, That was what was discursively described on the left-hand side of the page. It's reversed in this particular image. You have a little small inset picture of a very charming young gentleman in kind of,
It's a
even
school
for
child.
today,
It's a
school
school child.
child, school child. So you have this sort of, it's very easy to project on that photograph of the school child all these characteristics of innocence and organic childhood. And then all of a sudden he confronts us, in this case, on the right hand side of the canvas, with the with modern, up to date, cyborg technology, the television circuit board in this case.
But the argument is still the same, right?
Yes, I'm just saying, like, he flipped it visually.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
The argument here again, though, is that our institution, in this case, education,
Indeed,
fails us. It has not kept pace with technology, the circuit board. So you have the old timey child on the left, right, and the circuit board on the right. And the argument here, which I think is really interesting and gets me back to the question of contemplation, right, is this idea that our educational institutions are simply not equipped to manage the demand in front of them, as if to say this circuit board has no home, right? Like, it will not plug into what the educational system has. We cannot keep up with where our children need to be. And as a result, we've got this situation where our children are growing up absurd, according to him, right? Like, they don't have a spot to be because their existence outside of the classroom or the home, or in the home, their existence outside the classroom is madly accelerated, certainly not a childish place.
Exactly.
But the educational system has no place for children either. It's a factory. It's an assembly line that does not cater to what a child thinks or how a child thinks or processes. So essentially, we've got kids that are accelerated beyond the classroom, but without a place to be. And so, again, a case where our institutions lag behind, because I think these are sort of legacy institutions that can't account for new media and the influence of new media. So the question I have to you, if you're okay with this, I want to jump back to the quote on page 25. There is absolutely no inevitability as long as there are willingness to contemplate what is happening. So I got to thinking about my experience with my students, who are certainly children of a media saturated world. And I find that they fall into two camps, if I'm going to speak broadly, right? There are students that are curious and, engaged, but there is a version of student who has been completely, I don't know how to say this, pacified, right? They are content to stare at what their phone offers them. They are willing to click on whatever the next thing that the algorithm provides them. Their curiosity has been blunted. And so I think that, in a way, this is a sign of the time. This is the result of living in an environment where media and technology have provided a lot of the answers for us and have changed the learning environment, right? I have a paper to write. AI is going to write it for me. I have a question that I have to answer. I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to Google it, right? This goes back to Nicholas Carr wrote the essay, "Is Google Making Us Stupid?" I think it was in the 90s, right? There's been, I think it's from the book that, anyways, there's this question that I have about our willingness to contemplate. And if we look at the line here, there's absolutely no inevitability as long as there are willingness to contemplate what is happening. What is the inverse of that? There is an inevitability if our willingness to contemplate. Right. And so what's happening if our educational institutions are not equipped to provide for the students that they are supposed to serve? Are we enabling them to think? Are we encouraging them to think? Or are we simply putting them on an assembly line where this is the process, thank you. This is the process, thank you. This is the process, thank you. If that's the case, right? If we are not encouraging our students to think, if our government is functioning along sort of a binary set of options, we have option A and we have option B. What's your vote? Which channel do you want to watch? Which, quite frankly, is a frightening synopsis of where we are politically now, right? If this is the case, then there is inevitability. Now, I don't think he takes a side here, because I don't think he needs to take a side. I think he can simply say, look, if we contemplate, if we are willing to think, then anything is possible. However, if we fall in line with the institutions that have not kept up with the media environments, then there are inevitable outcomes.
Agreed. I mean, that, and you talked about his seriousness. I slightly disagree with you about, or it's not really a disagreement. You seem to push against my description of this book and a McLuhan as being playful. Now, because you say, well, there's a lot of seriousness here. There is indeed a lot of seriousness, but I do think that McLuhan is a thinker, and then particularly in this book, really what we're seeing is, I mean, his seriousness is intermingled with a lot of playfulness and vice versa. So you never get simple play. I would agree with you there.
Yeah.
But you never just get seriousness, period, I would say.
No, let me I agree with you. I think if you're going to take close-up pictures of toes,
yeah, you're being playful, or
you're having some fun.
Well, yeah, but
it's
was
not
the only
but I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry, but it's not. I want to say I feel like it's an ironic playfulness.
Oh, very much, total agreement. And also the only concession I wanted to hear you made, which is that it's an admixture, and their irony is actually, that's even better word to use. I would say everything here is ironized. That's part of the effect of the play. But I wanted to get to your point. But now here's one point that I was going to concede to your general description that before now you nuanced it, but your general description about his seriousness and purpose. I think that he is deadly serious about one thing, and you put your finger on it. He's deadly serious about the idea that if we don't contemplate, and here he does sound a little bit like a moralist. I do think he feels that there is some danger in inevitability. And for sure, if you do not contemplate if you do not ponder the true reality, nature of the reality that is around us, that you're participating in, you're partaking in, then you are delivered over. You're going to face some inevitable consequences, and the inevitability itself might be dangerous. So, and he's serious about that. It's a warning.
Well, I think this connects back to, this is funny. This is worked out in well. If we go back to the page with our hand and our 30 million toy trucks, he says, innumerable confusions and a profound feeling of despair inevitably emerge in periods of great technological and cultural transition. Right. Our age of anxiety is in great part the result of trying to do today's job with yesterday's tools. If we stay in this rut,
yeah,
then we are going to find. Yeah. And I still think that my position holds, in the sense that he's not saying that the anxiety that we feel is bad or misplaced. It simply is. If this, then that.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Well, yeah, there you.
Should we segue though into? You had an argument. So we've been trying to describe this mid to late section, and we sort of we're going to have another. We kind of picked a halfway point in the book.
Yeah.
to end this episode with. So we're around roughly on page 50 or so of the book, and there's about 50 pages more. A couple different arguments in those 50 pages. We don't know exactly how we're going to cover it. Let's get back to this episode, shall we? We've been talking about a mini section in our reading today where there is this juxtaposition that we've been talking about between the true nature of media reality, the media environment, what he believes is an accurate description of our media environment, and our fantasies about our reality. And he's getting at that in this section that we've been trying to provide a gloss to. Now, and you were saying that it all amounts in these snapshots of your government, your job, your family. There seems to be a kind of McLuhan's aim seemed to be to confront us with the ways in which our institutions have failed to alert us or to accommodate the new nature of a media determined reality.
Right.
Okay. So in the final section of the part that we're talking about today, at the end of the part one of the medium is the massage, you were talking. I'm gesturing back to something we talked about at the beginning of the, right before we started recording.
Mm-hmm.
You were saying there is a fundamental fact that he gestures to after this little section that the institutions are failing to account for. So I'm going to give a word summary of the images, mostly the images that follow, and then I want to hear Dr. Rapici's expert gloss of what's going on in this section that immediately follows the section we've been discussing. So what happens after page 25, there is absolutely no inevitability as long, etc. All of a sudden, we're confronted with pictures, microscopic, not very attractive pictures. Can I add that? Not very attractive pictures of, I'm not a foot person. So maybe I was never born. I was never ready. I was not ready for this book.
Yeah,
but we have a micro picture of
a toenail.
Looks like a pinky on a foot, and a toenail. And then we have an even larger enlargement of a foot, of a toe. But it is captioned "the wheel." And then we turn the page and we see, as if it were a film, we see, or this were 2001: A Space Odyssey, and all of a sudden the bone thrown in the air becomes the circling space station. We have the sentence caption that links the 2 pages is, "The wheel is an extension of the foot." And we are first shown or depicted a picture of a big toe, really big picture of a big toe. And then all of a sudden on the next page, we're shown a kind of, close up of a car wheel, automobile wheel. And then if we turn the page yet again, we have a 2-page section. At the top of the 2 pages, we have the phrase is spelled out, the book, and we have a hand opening a book, much like my hand and your hand is opening the book.
But I think but it's interesting. So the pages of the book are blank.
The pages of the book are blank. And then all of a sudden, we have the rest of the sentence that began on the facing page on the next page. The book is an extension of the eye. And of course, we have a close-up of the eye. And then finally, we have a picture, we have a juxtaposition. The caption on the 2 pages, the top of the pages is clothing, an extension of the skin. Underneath it seems to be a fully nude woman. And then if I turn the page yet again, we have this sentence, or this series of sentences, 2 sentences. Electric circuitry, an extension of the central nervous system. When these ratios change, men change. Okay. What's going on here? And how does this section words and pictures, Dr. Rapici, how's it relating to what we've just talked about, those preceding pages?
So the argument before this was that our institutions have failed to keep up with our media environment, with our technological realities. These are a series of situations arguing that essentially we have become cyborgs, right? That we have merged with our technology. And I think it's interesting because I didn't want to seem like I was just sort of the images of the toes, for example, are quite ugly. And we know, thanks to our earlier picture, that Marshal McLuhan had access to well-manicured nails, but he gave us ugly.
He doesn't
nails.
show us that. Yeah.
And so the argument here is that not only is the human form sort of ugly on its own, it's made whole by the wheel.
It needs improvement.
It needs improvement.
Beautification by technology.
The book is empty. The eye. So in that case, technology completes us.
Completes the eye.
The second one, the book, which is empty, is an extension of the eye. The eye,
yeah.
The book needs the eye in this case. Clothing, an extension of the skin. This is not, you mentioned it's a nude woman, but it is not a provocative picture or
no.
It's just this is just the
body in motion, really. It's like a body in motion, and it's a naked body in the sense of it's an unadorned body,
right?
And so there's this sense that clothing is an extension and improvement.
But it is not. I don't want to say it's an improvement, no, because again, that's a value judgment.
I'm sorry,
but none of these the body is not whole. Pictures of the toe are hard to discern at first, quite frankly. They're just
because they're magnified,
but they're not complete. You don't get a picture of the foot, you just get the toe.
Right.
So when the ratios change, men change, right? This is, I think, his argument that as technology continues to infiltrate and become a larger prosthetic, a more significant prosthetic, that our nature, our composition is altered as well, that we're not separate. We are changed by our technologies. That's my take on this. How do you read it?
That's exactly how I read it. And I would say you, in that last sentence you said, if you can repeat it, we have a great ending, because that last sentence you said, you don't know how to repeat
what did I say?
I'll try to repeat it. I thought what you were saying is that technology in all these various cases has always been acting as an extension of the organic. And I'll keep on using your value, the language of value free. Extension and augmentation and amplification and acceleration, intensification. Not necessarily an improvement, but a lot of other adjectives.
But what's interesting about this?
Can I
please, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but can I finish? Just because I thought this was your point here. What you had explained was that simple fact that technology has extended and therefore altered our ratios. That in a sentence or two, I think that was just a sentence. That's what all our politics, our home life, our government, our families, whatever,
right,
has not absorbed.
Correct. Those institutions have remained static. Our interactions with technology actually change us, and therein lies the problem, or therein lies the moment.
Therein lies the issue, right? It's the issue.
Right.
And we have not, and unless and getting back to our favorite page, now it's become our favorite page.
I'm going to change the logo.
There is absolutely no, I just want a t-shirt.
I may
it's ready
actually
to be a t-shirt, right?
It is, but
but getting back to our favorite page, the inevitability or non-inevitability, it all hinges on whether or not we are willing to contemplate what you just said, whether we're willing to contemplate the ways in which our sense ratios have been altered by technology? Are we willing to think about it and bring it on and rethink education and rethink politics and rethink things according to calibrate it along the new ratio? Are we willing to do that or not? A lot of things will inevitably happen if we don't.
I'm going to throw this out, and maybe I'm just going to toss it out and we can leave it and we can pick it up when we revisit the book next. If media massages us and makes us open to advertising and I'll just say the practice of media, if it opens us to the practice of media, that seems to me to be an argument against the willful contemplation, because the willful contemplation of this would necessarily be,
great question.
A noetic moment in Stiegler's terms. We would have to find a way to step out.
By the way, go ahead.
So I wonder if, again, I don't think he's trying to say good or bad. But I think I think that implicit in this argument is the fact that when media is doing the job that it's doing, it shapes our choices for us. It doesn't encourage us to think outside of the media box, because there is no outside of the media box. It's all encompassing. And so, I don't know that this is,
Michael, I dare say that you dropped a bomb at the end here. I don't think we should linger on it, but maybe we should take it up. Maybe definitely we should take it up next time, because if I heard you right, you dropped a bomb, because you're saying that there is a kind of contradiction that he doesn't seem to be aware of. And the contradiction is this. On the one hand, he wants to describe media, and subtitle of this book is The Inventory of Effects, and inventory, right? That's even more impartial.
Right.
I'm just gonna tabulate. I'm gonna list the effects.
I'm gonna count.
I'm just gonna count. I'm just describing back to the description critique thing. This is just an inventory. Don't shoot the messenger here. But okay. Can you open, and he's opening in a big way with this, it's his title. Can you open with a declaration that the media is the massage, and say, okay, that's what media does, and then at the same time build and develop an argument that says, hey, I'm just describing stuff that's happening, and it turns out media changes our sense ratios, and we got to contemplate that. Well, how can we contemplate? This is what I thought was the thrust of your argument. It seems like you're pointing out a contradiction, because it sounds like you're saying, well, how can I contemplate or not? If media is massaging me.
Let's not call it a contradiction yet. Let's call it a friction.
Attention. And
it's
a beautiful tension.
We'll pick it up next time.
I like that idea.
All right, Barry, as always, thank you. And to you listening to us at home, in your car, wherever you are, thank you as well. Again, I want to replug the website. It's up, it's functional. We would love to hear from you. The website is www.criticalmediastudies.com. Barry, thank you.
I like it. Take care, Michael.
All right,
thanks
you too.
Again.
Thanks for listening to the Critical Media Studies podcast. To find out more about the show, check out our webpage at criticalmediastudiespodcast.com.